I'm going to talk briefly about the energy revolution, water, and so forth. I want to my beginning point is, remember 5 or 6 years ago, we were told by many people in the media and on Wall Street and academia, the whole globe, that the US economy was dead and done, and that America's finest days were behind it. And it was China's turn to rise, and we were toast, so to speak. And I dealt a lot of that on Wall Street. In fact, today felt like one of those days, actually, going back 5, 6 years ago. But we had Washington, very dysfunctional, and down there nothing was getting done. You and I were upset with the Republicans and the Democrats, the president, and so forth. But lo and behold, over the last 5 years, we had an energy revolution here in the United States. And so when I think about the future of business, what we can do, I think it's boundaryless. The boundaries are they're way out there in terms of what we can do, because the energy revolution kind of speaks to the capabilities, the entrepreneurship, the merging of technology that U.S. companies do best. And I'll just be honest with you up front. I'm very bullish on the corporate America and the capabilities that we have, and for folks like Ted and others that are here tonight. So I go back to like that 5 years ago, thinking like it's the end of the world, China's eating our lunch, we're done, over and out, and so forth. And then while we all had our heads down, we had the energy revolution. Now, has anyone read the book, The Frackers? I'm not talking about the movie. And people confuse it. But The Frackers, read this book. Wall Street Journal writer wrote this book. And it's a great story. It's very simple. Entrepreneurship, technology, good state policies, North Dakota, Texas, Oklahoma, and Pennsylvania. Lo and behold, you have an energy revolution that changes the world, right? I mean, you're seeing it today in the markets. Saudi Arabia is pressing on OPEC, on the United States, to lower oil prices, increase capacity. Russia is in a real bind now because of the energy capabilities of the United States. And I've been told that since 1980, when I started my career on Wall Street, that we would never have any type of energy capabilities. But lo and behold, through entrepreneurship, risk-taking, technology, and good state policies, here we are. And it happened without Washington. That's the kicker. That's the key point. You had the corporate America, you had entrepreneurship, the technology married, coming together without Washington, non-federal lands, creating a huge global shift in the energy equation. And that just speaks volumes about our economy. And that was one reason I'm so bullish, because we do have risk takers. Risk takers, they make difficult choices, they win, they lose, but they push forward, and that's what we see happening really across the spectrum. And we're gonna need that to continue, because we still have a lot of demand out there. The energy revolution here in the United States on the supply side. We're going to go to 9 million barrels per day pretty soon, production. Probably go to 10, 11 million barrels in the next couple of years, given what we could do. If we had the federal government involved, we could do even more. But if they don't want to get involved, fine, we'll push forward. On the demand side, this is where I worry about, because we still have a lot of underlying demand coming out of China, India, and the emerging markets in general. And China is a fascinating story. Many of you have been there, but I remember going to China for the first time. I think it was 1980, 1981, and all I remember is so many people on bicycles. In Beijing, that's all you saw, and all the bicycles were black, by the way. If there was a white one out there, it was taken off the street real quickly, and we never heard from that person again. But you saw the energy when it came to like the bicycles. There was no per capita income. If you did see a car, it was typically with the US Embassy or high government officials. Now when you go to China, it's frightening. It's frightening because of the demand, the cars, and the fact that they don't know how to drive. That's the key issue. If you've been over there, be careful crossing the street. They're not sure what green, yellow, or red means. They'll figure it out. But in my lifetime as a Wall Street analyst, it's amazing to see a huge force of demand come out of China and put pressure on the global oil markets and the natural resources in general. India is behind China. They will come as well, and the emerging markets in general. So to me, when it comes to supply and demand energy equation, we still have a lot of work to do, but I'm not terribly worried about it, because I do think technology, the entrepreneurs, the innovation that we're doing today is going to help drive that growth. When it comes to agriculture and water, and I'll talk a little bit about that because that is a huge issue. I've been studying the water equation for now almost 12, 13 years. I had a chance to go over to Lebanon about a decade ago, and it was fascinating to me. We came up to a village and everyone was gone. There was no village. And they simply explained to me, they said, Joe, there's no one here because there's no water. And if there's no water, they move on. The whole village kind of picked up and left. They left a few belongings and so forth. And in the Middle East, that's the tipping point. Israel, out in front when it comes to water and the innovation to kind of store it, treat it, desalinate it, whatever in that sense. If you read the New York Times today, the business section, a good piece on water, it's cheaply priced. It's mispriced. If it's mispriced, there's no investment. There's no incentive for you and I or a company to push forward in helping to create more demand or supply for this commodity. Anytime a commodity is mispriced, it creates disincentives to invest. But we're reaching a tipping point. Now, we're in Chicago, it's raining, of course. I mean, every time I come here, it rains. I'm kidding, there's some beautiful days here as well. But if you've been out to California lately, if you've seen the news, they're in an epic drought right now. And it's changing their economics. It's changing how corporations are thinking, municipalities are thinking. It could impact their credit rating, the state overall. And so kind of we're at a tipping point when it comes to water use and water demand. And what do we do with it? We should reprice it right and so forth. And so we're here. And to me, I'm not worried about it. People think, you're really worried about water. What's it mean for slowing down growth? Here in the United States, I do believe there'll be innovation that steps forward, but still this commodity is mispriced as we speak today. So the water stress continues to build. And quite frankly, when you talk about China and India, you can't talk about their future unless you understand their water resources or the lack thereof, particularly in China, for instance. That economy will stumble, will not succeed at growing at 7%, employing all those millions of new graduates coming out of those colleges and aspiring and wanting to acquire the lifestyle you take for granted. It's not going to happen if they don't have that one simple commodity called water, whether it's for agriculture, industry, residential construction. Without it, you can't grow. India is another story as well, in the sense that if they don't have clean water, if they can't have their kids trust their food security, their food supply, the water supply, they're not going to grow. So there's a lot at stake here in the United States. We can say we can take care of our own problems, but really it's a global issue that needs to be reconciled. And we are pushing on the frontiers, whether it's desalination, whether it's wastewater treatment, whether it's other issues. The Israelis, some folks up in Finland, the Germans, the US companies, this excites me. Where there's some of the best investment opportunities is in that space. Water, lack thereof, affects agricultural commodities. We're still very bullish on agricultural commodities. We've seen a lot of supply, good harvests here in the United States related to wheat, soybeans, corn, so it's had prices drop. But if you look at the global dietary shift in consumption of protein, it's frightening what's coming. It really worries me in the sense that a lot of countries may not be able to feed their population, or they'll be left behind, or they'll be malnourished, which in itself creates more poverty than already exists, particularly in Africa and other points. So we're seeing very clearly the agricultural stress play out globally as well. We're in the catbird seed, the United States, in the sense that we're a huge agricultural producer, but nevertheless, we're one connected global economy. If we've learned anything in the last couple of trading sessions, starting last week, what happens overseas ultimately impacts our markets and vice versa. We've got a global growth scare related to Europe, to the emerging markets, Ebola, China slowdown, and that's just emblematic of a world that's deeply connected, integrated. And what happens over there comes to our shores and vice versa. So here we are today, and that's to me is what's lacking when it comes to the energy complex, when it comes to water, when it comes to agriculture. There's no global cooperation. It's every man for himself. It's my resources are ours, they're not yours. At the height of food prices reaching peaks back in 2009, 2008, you saw resource nationalism, right? What is that? Resource nationalism. That's hugely important in the sense that this is my corn, this is my earth minerals, this is my commodity. I'm not selling it to you for whatever price you want, because we need to keep it here for populist pressures. This could still play out in many parts of the world, whether it's in India, whether it's in Russia, it's Ukraine, and so forth. So resource nationalism is kind of taking a back seat here related to the commodity boom and the falling prices, but it's still out there. There is no global coordination between the US, between the Europeans, and the Chinas and the Indias of the world. And that leads to global climate change. That's a big issue we talk about at US Trust. global climate change, carbon emissions, what's happening. And to my mind, President Obama has taken the mantle of leadership, John Kerry as well, Hillary Clinton before him, and so forth. We push forward, I think. This administration's done a good job recognizing global climate change and the challenge. But if you don't bring India and China on board, it's not going to happen. It's going to fall flat, right? In California right now, one of their imports from China is their pollution, right? They can track the particles coming across the Pacific, coming down the West Coast. So when we talk about global climate change, the stress on the energy infrastructure, water, and so forth, it has to be globally coordinated. And that's where I'm most pessimistic about, because I don't see that in that sense where the US or the Europeans can get together, work out with the Indians and Chinese and Brazilians, say, hey, listen, this is in our interest to make this happen. It's not happening there. And that's something that we should all be concerned about, because we are importing other people's pollution and vice versa. And so, keep that in mind. So kind of the last comment I'll talk about is that when, we're used to condition, we have portfolios set up where, it's in Asia, it's in Europe, it's in the United States. But when I look north-south, this is the best place to be. Think Canada down to Argentina. This is a breadbasket. This is where the energy is. This is where the water. This is where all the agricultural commodities is. When you think northwest, western hemisphere, there's a tremendous amount of commodities that the rest of the world needs that we can supply them. And what worries me is that we're not working with the Canadians. We're not working with the Mexicans or the Brazilians when it comes to increasing the supply for all the demand that's yet to be out there that needs to be met. So we have a Western Hemisphere portfolio that kind of taps into that north-south look and say, what can we do to build this out? But on the policy front, when I bring this up in Washington, it kind of goes in one ear and out the other, even if it goes in one ear. I'm not sure if it makes it that far. But that goes back to what I said about the lack of policy global coordination when it comes to that. We have a very good opportunity to work with the Mexicans when it comes to their energy prospects. We're doing a decent job with Canada, although I think some of the Canadians would argue against that, given the Keystone Pipeline. But the Keystone Pipeline in of itself tells you how hard it is just for two neighbors, two friends, to work together to make for a better overall energy prospect picture for the United States. And ironically, this is kind of the most ironic thing, is here today, Europe is a key ally of the United States. And here Europe is, it's getting cold over in Slovakia right now, it's getting cold in Ukraine, and there's the prospects of Russia potentially turning off the pipelines. And I've been over Slovakia, Bratislava, when the pipelines have been turned off, and believe me, it gets pretty cold over there, right? If we were all here tonight, when I was over there, we'd all have big fur coats on, and any fur, anything you could drape on you, it was that cold. That prospect is out there again this year. And so my question is, if that's about to happen, right? If Europe is so dependent on an unreliable supplier called Russia, why can't the United States and Europe bridge that energy gap? Why aren't the United States and Europe working together to take our excess natural gas, our excess oil, and export it to those willing and able markets to consume our natural resource? It helps with our trade balance, it helps with our competitiveness, it helps for a healthier relationship. And that's just kind of emblematic of, to me, kind of like the breakdown on the policy front in terms of a huge opportunity to make a transatlantic bridge vis-a-vis energy and have that happen. Conversely, the same thing, when you go to China, their energy needs are similar to ours. They burn a lot of coal. They shouldn't. We've got the technology. We're giving up on coal, so to speak, pulling it back a little bit here. But if the Chinese and the Americans work together when it came to fostering a better energy policy for the future, think of the opportunities. It's exponential. And that's why I hope where private businesses go, the innovators go, the Chinese innovators, the risk takers, the United States, the Europeans as well, can meet together without the policies, without the politics, and push ahead like we did with the energy revolution here in the United States. And I kind of end there again, because I want to emphasize, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, every client meeting I went to, it was, Joe, we're done, we're cooked, we blew up the house, I'm sending my kids to another country, it's over. And it was very sad. Maybe some of you I talked to during that. You kind of wore me down, but then we started to see the production numbers come out of North Dakota, what was happening in Texas. I live in Pennsylvania. I saw the natural gas boom come forward. And lo and behold, while our heads were down, 5 years later, we changed the global economics of oil. We, the private sector, without Washington's help. And that's an underlying story about our capabilities. And I think when it comes to any innovation, whether it's healthcare, whether it's going to Mars, whether it's undertaking any undertaking, the U.S. does it best. But we need to do better pulling in the brains, the best and brightest of the Chinese, the Indians, the Israelis, the Poles. I think that makes for a better connected world, makes for a better world overall when it comes to energy. And we're not going to be able to address it ourselves. That's the key issue. The United States has done a phenomenal job when it comes to resetting, rejiggering the energy global markets, but we could do better with cooperation. We could do better if we worked with the Europeans. We could do better even if we worked with the Russians, right? They have a lot of natural gas that we need to have out in the oil fields. Africa is suffering as well as oil prices decline. So long story short, the energy prospects, I've been told we can't do it before, but read the book, The Frackers, or just pay attention to what's happening in Montana, Texas, Pennsylvania. Look at the energy policy. Our potential is exponential, think of it that way. And to me, it's just emblematic of the great corporate American story that we're risk takers leveraging technology. You put the right policies in place, anything and everything can happen. Thank you.